Well, I wish I was more skilled at this. Now this would be easier if I just move this here. Okay. I'm ready. Is everyone else ready? Thanks for bearing with me there for a second. Can everybody online hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Well, thanks, Brandon. And Rebecca. Okay, and Rebecca's here. So the time is 6:33 p.m. and I'll call the meeting to order. First item on our agenda tonight is to approve the agenda. Draft agenda has a study session with 2 presentations that likely will kind of blend together. The point of the presentations is to be able to provide us a high level understanding of the city county strategic plan to address homelessness, and then drill down more specifically around the most urgent needs that for the most part are inside the addendum number 1 to our funding agreement. And then we'll have time to ask a bunch of questions, however we want to proceed with trying to frame up a common understanding of what the plan is calling us to do. And then I think we should be able to finish up a study session and do it. And then if we have time, we'll also go into the executive session that we kind of started last time we met. This will hopefully give us more time tonight to do that. Are there any changes anyone would like to make to the agenda? Then can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
In a second?
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Rebecca?
Aye.
All right, then we'll start with the study session going into the community plan to end homelessness. And I believe this is where you wanted to queue it up.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think a lot of folks around this table are familiar with our strategic plan. Just for a quick turnaround, I grabbed the most recent presentation that the city and the county did to update the 2 county and city commissions earlier this summer. So this one was from July, and while it's got all the city of Lawrence branding information, this was the session that was just for the Lawrence City Commission. We've done a almost identical presentation for the Douglas County Commission previous, and this update was at the end of a series of listening sessions that started in April and ended in May, with the collaborative group of stakeholders that have been meeting for almost 2 years now, after a convening that was organized at, by KDADS to try to have some, envision some collective impact strategies around addressing homelessness. And that resulted in, if you scroll down, Charlie, to, this is specific to the goals of the city of Lawrence, their strategic plan, but this is a listing of the collective of agency, organizations that have come together and developed the draft strategic plan. Next slide. Real quickly, like our overall objective is to create a system that achieves functional zero through policy, system, and environmental changes, resulting in Douglas County residents having access to the fundamental human right of safe, accessible, attainable, and affordable housing in which homelessness is a rare and brief occurrence. Next slide. The name of our plan is A Place for Everyone. As I said before, we had a series of listening sessions. There were 2 that were virtual, 2 that were in person, and 2 that were specifically for our community members with lived experience. In total, there were more than 200 participants in those sessions. Next slide. What we heard from those listening sessions, what's listed here are the things that rose to the top, that were common themes. These are not reflective of every single comment that was shared in those sessions, but these were the things that consistently came up when we went through all the notes, went through all the flip charts from the different sessions. These are the things that rose to the top. So the importance of centering and compensating those with lived experience, prioritizing meeting basic health, dignity, and safety and well-being of our unhoused community. That in order to reach our goals, organizational capacity issues have to be addressed, and that remains to this day. And I think that's relevant to this conversation. More community engagement and education is needed to increase community buy-in. And I won't read all that next. Significant need for additional accessible and affordable quality person-centered housing for the unique populations. If you're familiar with what led us to this work, we did 2 needs assessments, both of which identified that we have nationally significant disparate rates of homelessness among female population in Douglas County. Those are disproportionate to the national average and the state average. So we have to be laser focused on strategies for those community members. That there's a power imbalance between well-resourced homeowners and business owners compared to low-income community members who lack power and representation. More details are needed to inform the plan. Next, these are just some of the common comments that we received just to complement this work. That mental and behavioral health services are needed. Recommendations for green and sustainable building requirements. One-stop shop, employment services, that there's understanding the intersection of sexual and domestic violence as it relates to homelessness, need for more accessible and affordable housing, that there's stereotypes and stigma against people experiencing homelessness. Transportation, it continues to be a challenge. Takeaways, things are bad and they are worse than we thought. And that comment comes directly from some hard conversations that were had with county administrator and city manager and assistant city management, myself, when we were all just trying to make heads or tails of where we go from here, because we had some really hard realities once we got to the end of those listening sessions. But things are bad, and they're still bad and they're still hard. Service providers are at their limits. We need more money, resources, and help. This is risky, and we need open hearts and minds and compassionate hearts, but we're not giving up. I think all these things are true today and probably true for folks around this table. A snapshot here of current city spending. I can provide information about county spending as well that parallels this. A lot of the county's spending is largely invested in mental and behavioral health, substance use disorder, and specialty partnerships that we have with organizations like Artists Helping the Homeless, Bert Nash, and Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority for specific to housing. Next slide. Let's see, and this was a look at what the city of Lawrence was looking to invest moving forward, or had invested over the previous 5 years. Initial cost estimates, that was a big ask in the listening sessions that we begin putting some numbers to our big audacious plan. We're still working on that. So that was the takeaway from this presentation in July, was that the deliverable to the strategic plan groups was that we were going to finalize our plan, come back to the city and the county commission and give them those cost estimates along with a blessing to move forward. And that's going to happen in January at a joint city county commission meeting. Where do we go from here? We're prioritizing community engagement, education, and listening sessions. We're going to do more of those. We're going to document those immediate short and long-term needs, continue developing the plan, and continue to have brave and strong leadership supporting the solutions. Real quickly, I think folks know that, but just how the plan is oriented, and this isn't in this document, Charlie, but I'll just briefly mention it, that the way we've oriented our plan in terms of focus areas is our equity and inclusion focus area sits at the very top, because we believe that issues of equity and inclusion are inherently should drive the upstream solutions to this work, because we know that discriminatory practices and stigma do impact folks experiencing homelessness. The next is affordable housing. If we don't have affordable housing, we're not going to solve homelessness. And that impacts everybody regardless of your housing status. The next focus area is on supportive housing, and that acknowledges the needs assessment that Douglas County did with the Corporation for Supportive Housing, that we need some 300 plus units of permanent supportive housing in this community for unique populations. That includes the IDD population, our folks that are experience chronic homelessness, folks that are exiting jail and other criminal justice facilities, folks that are experiencing a mental illness, substance use disorder, transitioning foster kids, families. And then the next area is our systems work group. So that is really making sure that systems like the Homeless Management Information System, HMIS, that the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition administers for us, is doing what it needs to do, and that all of our stakeholders are participating in that system to make sure that we have the most actionable, complete data snapshot of who's experiencing homelessness and how we can quickly exit them out of homelessness if at all possible. And so that's what systems is. And then sitting at the bottom of what we consider to be an inverted triangle in this work is emergency shelter. And it's an inverted triangle in that way because we feel like we have put a lot of resources into emergency shelter in this community historically. We still will, but we want to be thinking upstream. We want to be investing upstream so that we can at some point have less of our resources invested in emergency sheltering. But we all know, and obviously that's what we'll talk about tonight, that we know that we're going to have to make some short-term and perhaps some longer-term investments in a more high-functioning emergency shelter system. So that's a high level. I know Misty has some stuff that she wants to share as well, but I can stand for questions before we move on.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Go ahead.
So when you were talking about the budgetary items associated with that, are all of those items currently, are the programs to fund those, or are we still looking for other sources of funding to accomplish those tasks?
I think what's in the strategic plan right now, it's not all funded. There's a lot that is funded. If you look at the city's investments in the homeless initiatives department, the affordable housing investment is significant for the city of Lawrence. Douglas County supportive housing, we have a huge footprint already in our supportive housing work. So, but we have to accomplish what's in the strategic plan, it's going to take a whole lot more. I can say that the county's looking to utilize the 50 quarter-cent sales tax in the future to have ongoing funds for permanent supportive housing for those folks that we know need it. So it's a mixed bag.
You others have questions? Okay, well, thank you, Jill. I think we'll move over to Misty then. Then you want me to queue up this?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So developed out of the strategic plan are different work groups, and the work group that we're referring to tonight as emergency services and sheltering. And from the work group, these are the key takeaways that we've identified, key needs that we've identified that we feel that the shelter could help with. So the first one is provide single women and families with children immediate access to low barrier emergency shelter services. We currently do not have any emergency shelter services for single women only or families with children. Even though that population, single women, was I think about 51% of our unsheltered or of our homeless. So it is the larger percentage of our homeless, but we do not have a resource for them. Increase the number of immediate access, low barrier emergency shelter services for single adults experiencing homelessness. Even with the addendum that we recently agreed upon, it does not meet our need. Today, we did an event with just one camp, and there were 50 unsheltered individuals that came to our event looking for emergency sheltering, all sleeping outside. So, you know, the ways that we can address that is definitely pallet. That's going to be 50 additional emergency sheltering beds. In addition to that, I would like to talk about a little bit about the additional pallets that we have. We have 25 additional in our possession pallets that we're not going to be using at Pallet Village. Those are owned by us. We also have opportunity to get about 20 to 25 more from an agency in Kansas City that planned on doing a Pallet Village and then was not able to. So they have offered those to us.
You say 25 more?
25 more, yeah. So 20 to 25, I believe the number was 45 total, so I think it was 20. What would make the most sense to me was to put them where the resources are going to be, and that's behind the shelter and in the lot that was kind of developed for Monarch Stage 2 that didn't get carried out. So that would be my recommendation. Again, we have some unused units at Monarch that just need a little bit of work. We've had somebody on our team go out there and take a look at those and see what it would take to get those up and running. And I believe pretty quickly we could get 6 of those up and running. And those can be for smaller families. I believe they have 3 beds, right? 3 twin size beds.
Yeah, some of them got taken out, but we can do up to 4 beds per unit.
And remind me how many can sleep in the pallet?
2 can sleep in there, but we would not put 2 unrelated individuals.
Right.
And then lastly on that piece is a some way for family shelter to happen. I believe that there is space at the shelter to expand and allow for I can't say how many beds, but pretty big amount. We looked at the warehouse yesterday. It does have a sprinkler system, it does have heat, it does have bathrooms. There could be a special use permit that's applied for just for that area if we wanted to use that to get some people indoors and out of the elements. That's definitely something that we could do, and we could probably make that happen pretty quickly. And then moving forward long term, there's definitely an opportunity to use some grant funding to develop that area and make it something not just a response to an emergency, something long term that that would meet a need. Okay, reduce the Douglas County annual point in time count from unsheltered or for unsheltered individuals by 50%. Even though the unsheltered number last year was little less than 100, like I said, today, there was 50 people camped at Camp New Beginnings, so we know that that number is nowhere near what it was last year. I think we're guesstimating around 350 to 400 unsheltered individuals right now. That's just a number that we don't have like our hands on. We don't have that in data, but that's kind of a guesstimate of boots on the ground individuals.
Could you repeat that number, please?
I think it's around 350. That's what we're hearing unsheltered.
To your top bullet, do you have an estimation of how many single women versus how many families with children?
I don't have that right now.
Okay.
But I do have that we have 17 families with children in need of shelter.
And with the special use permit you're speaking of in developing the area that is used right now, it's more like a warehouse or storage. It could be used for emergency shelter.
Yes.
What's the capacity for that? How many folks could be comfortably placed in that space for overnight for something as a bed or, you know, things that they would need immediately to service their needs?
I think I would have to ask our planning department on that exact number. Based on the square footage, I think Melanie's gonna get us the floor plans and that would help determine that full number, but if I had to guess, I would say 60 to 100. I was thinking max probably around 100, yeah.
So the square footage per individual will be about what?
I'll have to get that number.
Okay, that's good.
Would it be similar to the current dorms, how they're set up? Is that
I think so, yeah.
with bunk beds or with single, just without?
I mean, if we were doing an emergency, it seems like there's difficulty with individuals using bunk beds, so we might be able to pull those apart and use those top bunks in a different area and then kind of safely separate different populations.
Missy, on your first point there, is the low barrier phrase kind of critical on that comment? Or because there are services that are within the community currently, in some of the families, and but the low barrier aspect is the.
So none of those current services are emergency sheltering. So, and there is a barrier, like you do have to say, I will participate in your program for X number of months. So nobody, a homeless family could not call anywhere right now and say, I need some place to stay, and that need be met. So that's what that means. I do understand that Family Promise has a family program, but they are not an emergency program. So I think they have about a 90-day-ish wait list before you can kind of get into their programming if you do agree to things. But they would work with our people. If we did find emergency sheltering option, they said that they would commit to working with anybody that wanted to work with them and then move them along out of that emergency shelter situation into transitional and then on through their program.
Family Promise, you doing anything to increase their capacity to take on that emergency shelter for?
No,
Okay,
They
they
do.
have no interest in.
right, that is just not their program.
It's not part of their national model either.
Got it.
Yeah.
And Willow's maxed. I mean, we also know that Willow's is full. And that you have to be a survivor of domestic violence to even get in, but that's another place. But I mean, there's really nothing.
Are they currently completely full, or are they full for the amount of staffing capacity that they
The
have?
latter.
The latter.
Is there opportunity to utilize existing homes that they have that they don't have staffing capacity for some families?
I think if they had funding for staff and if a family met that criteria, of the seeking services for domestic violence.
Do we have an idea of how many unused residents that Willow has right now?
Misty and I did a tour recently and it's not a lot.
Oh,
It's not a lot, yeah. And I didn't say it's a lot, not enough to, I think would be worth it right now.
got it.
Yeah, there may have been 3 to 4 family options.
Family units.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have they ever said if they would be willing to like master lease to use them for other purposes, like an agency?
Well, I think the issue is they are using a portion of the other unit that they have vacancies in, so.
I also think that what was shared with us is that those properties were donated explicitly. There was some funding that was explicit to Willow. So I mean, we'd have to talk to Jessica. I think that would be a separate conversation, but they're a part of our stakeholder group and
It's one option.
yeah.
Misty, on the first bullet, did you say we just don't have shelter, emergency shelters specific to single women? Is that what that was?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause we,
Yeah, our states like single women who maybe for whatever reason didn't want to be in the same space with Brand.
we do have that issue.
Any other questions?
The Misty, the Pallet Village, the first 50,
Yes.
right? What's the current timing for those being operational and available to folks?
They're going to be built the last week of November. So then it's just figuring out who's going to operate. And then
Is there any plan in place right now for the operation?
there's interest, but I feel like I would ask the board here to consider operating that, being the who operates emergency shelter. I would ask that that's considered, just because I feel like this is something that we need to work really well. And we need it done by somebody who has experience. The other nonprofit that's considering does not have experience in this arena. So that would be something I would ask the board to consider this evening.
And just numbers and data that you have shared, I just wanted to get a confirmation. You said that 6 of the pallets that we currently have could be used immediately. The 3-bedroom ones that we have.
Modern, yeah.
Okay, you said the 25 pallets were gonna be donated from some
Yes,
organization,
yes.
and those will have how many, what would those, the capacity for those?
They'll be the same as the ones that we have too. So we'll take 1 person, but if there's 2 related folks, we could put 2 in there.
To that max is 2.
Max is 2.
And then I have another number, it says 25 not going to be used. Did you say that? 'Cause I wrote that
Yeah,
down.
so whenever pallet was planned here, we planned on 75 units. And then with the floodplain of the area that we were using, we could only use 50.
Okay.
There's potential 45
Use.
added to the property.
Yes, we would like to add.
So the Kansas City agency, those were donated, potential to be donated?
They were doing,
They were or they could be?
they were offered to us.
They will.
For free, yes.
Okay.
Is there a possibility, I mean, are these stationary, these pallets? I mean, I'm imagining they're movable. So if you're in a flood area, could they be moved somewhere else or no?
I believe so. Can we ask?
I just saw someone say, like, I don't know. if
Well,
that's
what
a-
she's saying is they're not allowed to put them in part of the new property that is in the floodplain.
Okay,
So they can't use all 75 in that location. Don't understand that.
Yes.
That's on like a zoning
Yeah,
compliance.
Yeah.
but there's an opportunity for them to be located somewhere else.
correct.
Yes.
Yes.
There's also potentially an opportunity for, let's say, 25 of those or some number to be designated for single women with 1 or 2 kids, that type of thing, and have that location separate from the current location on Michigan Street, which will not be operated that way, right?
Yeah,
So
so we did,
there's several considerations. I think there's several considerations around the potential for these additional pallet homes.
I think that we had a really hard time finding locations for the current pallet site, and that's why I would encourage you guys to consider putting those behind the community shelter.
Will all 45 fit?
They will.
On the point in time count, I'm a little bit worried about that metric being used in any agreement because it is so unreliable. And I know from 2022 to 2023, the number jumped significantly. And I know for us in 2022, it was like during an ice storm, it was like below 0, it was miserable, and we didn't have a lot of staff to help. But this year, it was very nice, and we were able to put a lot of staff out there. So I think we were able to access more. So for us, because we know there's unsheltered people out there above what those numbers reflect.
Yeah.
And for us to say that we're reducing that number when it's not accurate in the first place wouldn't be a good metric to me. But I think if we could just demonstrate that our bed utilization rate and our census is up to whatever that expectation is determined, would be a lot better, because that's just not going to be accurate for anything for us to try to set as a goal.
And I think we set that goal out
Rebecca has her hand up.
a couple.
Rebecca, sorry, I missed you. Go ahead and speak.
Thank you. I just had a couple questions. So mostly about the capacity for families. So is there, like, I know Misty, you talked about increasing the capacity within the shelter building. Is there any thought of putting families in the shelter building right now?
If we could do so in a safe and secure way, yes. There's definitely the capacity. There would just need to be, it would need to be a very safe and secure way of doing things. And then, you know, and if we do have the opportunity to maybe have 45 pallets out back, you know, then maybe that's a place where we can move individuals that for potential previous criminal convictions can't be around children. And just to kind of keep things safe and separated. For the pallet village itself, that's going to be a place that we cannot have violent offenders or sex offenders. So, you know, we have some opportunity here to put people in groups and like groups that are safe and to keep them safe. You know, we've kind of talked, Melanie and I kind of talked about the people that are in the day program. Probably not saying the right word, but the programming, the 25 that are in programming right now, that population would definitely, in my mind, fit better at pallet. Because it's going to be a small specialized group that is vulnerable and have some good services wrapped around them there too. And then, you know, that would open up more space at the shelter for the individuals, you know, that don't need so much one-on-one individualized care.
And can you remind me, how many are in the night by night?
How many are average are coming to night by night, or how many beds we have available?
How about both of those?
Okay, we're averaging, well, before the cold weather, we were averaging about 60 to 65 per night, just for the night by night. And we have up to 98 beds, give or take. We try to reserve 2 for the Douglas County Reentry Program. So otherwise we would have 100 for the night by night.
And so that number is beyond the 25.
Yes.
Rebecca, did you have other questions you wanted to?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask, the pallet shelters, do those have just 1 bed in them, or are there 2 beds?
There are 2, I believe.
Okay. I haven't been in those, but I've been in the Monarch tiny homes. So how, like, is a pallet like about half the size of a Monarch home?
It's it's 8 by 8. I can't remember what the Monarch.
Do you have some that could be brought here just for demonstration?
Yes.
Maybe that would be helpful for any of us that wanna
Yep.
take a look at it. I've been through the Monarch unit just recently, and I mean, it is pretty nice size space. If you had 4 people in there, it would be pretty cramped, but it does provide privacy for that group of 4, if they will all use it.
What are the resources embedded, like, do they have sink, running water?
Heat and cold, right?
Yeah, they have heated and air, and they have an electricity.
Rebecca, did you have other questions?
Just one more. So if we're kind of, if the shelter's usually at about 125 right now, and if Misty's talking about adding like, I think maybe 100, I mean, is that the goal to get 225 people in that building?
I think that
So I'm tracking the numbers, and maybe you can double check me on this. But it sounds like potentially there could be 270 beds on this campus, and then 50 at the pallet shelter village. So altogether 320. Is that,
I don't have a specific number because we would need our planning department to identify.
so we're still kind of waiting for better information about the potential use of the warehouse side of the building?
Yeah.
So that could be up to 100 perhaps. I use that for my assumptions. And then potentially 45 pallet shelters behind the current building. That brings, with the 125 as our current, that would bring the total at that campus to 270. Which would then be supported with day services, food, which we haven't really talked about yet. Your last bullet, maybe you want to give us kind of insight on that one.
Okay. So establish a homeless community outreach and day center facility with programming and services to provide access to basic hygiene, including bathrooms, showers, laundry, to promote dignity and public health. This basically, we need to be able to serve the people where they are. We need, if our population is gonna be here and, we're kind of taking the homelessness out of the community and putting it here, then we need to have community here and have all the resources that individuals need to recover from homelessness. So those are just the basic things that, they would need. As far as the community outreach, Jill and I have been looking, and Bob Transky, we've all been looking at our contracts with different service providers and seeing how we could bring those services to the people. And that's really, I mean, we know what we've been paying for as city and county, and how things they're not working as they are right now. Homelessness is increasing, and it's not just those factors, but we need to try to do some things differently and try to, I mean, we can end chronic homelessness if done right. And that's very basic that we can be doing. So I guess what I'm asking is, the shelter to be the emergency shelter, and then kind of let us help guide with the contracts that we already have in place, and put in programming that, case management, whatever programming that we can do, behavioral health, substance use, we have all of those contracts that we would, be able to use and say, we need you here on these days, doing outreach and trying to help this population.
Can you remind me, is it 8 Monarch? 12. Okay.
And one of them is ADA, so it would not have the 4 twin size beds that would fit. It would be just really one, but up to 2.
And
Yeah,
then,
that wasn't even in my count, so.
and then can you remind me, what's the maximum occupancy for the building, not just beds or anything, but fire code maximum occupancy?
So it's like 75, but then the special use permit put it up to 125 on just a typical basis, but then if the weather drops below 40, there had been an amendment to the original special use permit that allows us to go up to 140.
Melanie, that's in the, that doesn't include,
It doesn't include Monarch.
it doesn't include the warehouse, does it? I mean, that's your current
Right,
housing area.
it would need its own special use permit to,
So to go to 145, special use permit is only eligible if temps are below 40. And then if temps are above 40, it back down to 85,
125.
back down to 125.
It's
Okay.
125 and 140.
Okay,
Would it be helpful at all to look at Palette online and
Sure.
see what they look
If you
like?
wanna direct me,
Just a clarification too on the, Melanie talked of the point in time count. I have it 350, is that correct? And that is not the point in time that is pretty accurate. Do you feel like it's more or less than that count is estimated?
Does that include unsheltered? Because the point in time count includes.
Unsheltered that's shared here.
Yeah, I think it's closer, much closer than we've ever been to it. And like I said, I think the weather and the manpower we have really helped.
Yeah.
But I honestly am not someone that's out in those areas much, so I really myself, I don't have a good idea of that.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, because I know you said that wasn't very accurate, and I want to see what was your accurate to you?
Yeah, the point in time count has been pretty controversial and known to be just inaccurate in general.
Yeah, at first we had that goal was
It's still
25%. And we had some hard discussions about, is that aggressive enough? Acknowledging that it's already a bad number. The point in time count is a bad number, because we know that even with some more recent efforts to do outreach at the camps, there's a whole lot of folks that have never been entered into HMIS before that we know are out there. So we had, after a lot of good discussion and one of the emergency service and shelter meetings a couple months ago, we pushed the goal up to 50, just because we felt that if we weren't really aggressive, while acknowledging it's based on a bad number, but hopefully we'll have a better number in the future.
Right, that's helpful.
Yeah, another part of that that's really difficult is we don't know when someone leaves the area.
Yeah.
And they will not call off the by name list unless nobody has had any contact with them and entered it into HMIS. So that has to happen too within 90 days. If there's nothing updated on that person for 90 days, then they fall off.
But I like having a bigger number and then scaffolding that down and being, I would like it being aggressive so that we can accommodate for those unknowns.
Just wait a minute.
is there a particular part of their website you want me to pull up?
It's the
Okay,
8x8. I think it's, can you go down just a little bit?
this looks good.
Shelter
Yeah, that's-
64, that's it.
Okay, let me,
So while you're looking for that, I just wanted some, a little bit of context from the county, since we have Jill here. And this is establishing, what I really want to kind of understand is the community outreach and day center facilities programming and services. And looking into all of the supported networks, the individual or the institutions, organizations that are already contracted by the county. Are we hearing that like there will be Bert Nash supporting client services because the county supports Bert Nash's operations, so they will be asked to be pulled into services that we would offer from the community. And then bathrooms and those facilities like the rec center, like are those operational where we could maybe bus people? I'm thinking like planning of like movements So can we use facilities like Lawrence Rec Center, with showers for families? Or, I mean, what do we have at our disposal to be able to utilize for families to reach services? Because we want to make sure we're healing centered and we're inviting people, we're providing for people. And promoting dignity and public health. We could utilize all those with the county's assistance to move people into spaces to, I'm sorry, you want to
That's
talk and
okay.
I want to keep asking.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that what supports the county and the city are providing in order for this to be sustainable throughout the winter time.
Yeah, I can't answer the utilization of the city buildings. But in terms of our service agreements with Bert Nash, DECA, Heartland Radac, and we do this with LCS as well, as we consult with the city and we jointly decide what are our priorities that we're gonna articulate in our funding agreements with those agencies and how can those be aligned with one another. Bert Nash is one that we've been most recently have been having those discussions related to homeless outreach, because both of our organizations share a common agreement around have common funding agreements that focus on homeless outreach and services to unhoused folks. The county has a lot more explicit, a lot more depth of services in our service agreement with Bert Nash for a variety of things that should serve homeless folks, particularly the way that they're structured now with some of their CCBHC models. But you know, we're talking to other organizations as well. Heartland Community Health Center is one that we're talking to a whole lot more, but the county has had a dedicated intensive care coordination position funded at Heartland Radac that's just dedicated to the Lawrence Community Shelter for 3 years now. So folks that's care coordination to help folks navigate the different aspects of the continuum of care, the different service providers. But we have resources available and we try as much as possible to be really explicit in how we utilize them.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just thinking of this being as we understood COVID was, which is a crisis.
Yeah.
We have a person who has just passed, who was using outside as their home, and we understand that is just recent news. How do we then move to make this a crisis and pull in supports as we did at the health department, like just using what COVID did to unsilo all the organizations and have us work collectively on this particular issue as well.
I would just speak to that and say, if we were to be in agreement on the possibilities here, that would resolve the need for, I mean, that's a resolution of the crisis, is to use what we have and then just build upon it as we can. We do offer the community buildings, just normal business hours. People can still use those as well to stay warm and whatever services they offer.
So, what are the bathroom facilities at the shelter currently?
I believe, I'm trying to remember what the count was because it had to be in the special use permit. But we, by that permit, we only have enough facilities to equal what the permit allows, because you have to have so many sinks.
Which
and
is the
showers.
125 or the 145? Which one?
I think the 140 was just extra, but I would think it was around the 125 number. What are your number?
I don't understand when you say 140 is extra.
But because I did an amendment to the original special use permit, as well, I think Lauren asked to be able to include more people during the winter. So the original special use permit, there were floor plans and that's what I looked at based on the square footage and the number of people served. At that time, they made sure the facilities matched the original permit. And then Lauren came back later and said, can I at least go up to 140 in the winter? So I believe those facilities were originally approved or the capacity was approved based on those current facilities.
But you don't know what we have.
I can't remember how many toilets we have in the building.
What's
I
the
mean,
best practice though, for X number of beds is X number of, I mean, I didn't know, who knows what that,
on, like planning wise, permit wise?
Yeah, I don't know if it's best practice or if it's determined by.
It's
the
like
planning
12,
department.
it's like 12 to showers.
When I had asked our planning director before about like, is this even a possibility? He said, you know, as long as there's restrooms and there is a sprinkler system and heat, then yes.
so how many will be available at Pallet?
Restrooms,
And shower?
I believe there's ADA, 2 showers.
2 ADA and 4 regular.
So total is 6. And that's toilet and shower.
2 trailers, 1 trailer with an ADA unit and 2 normal units in each trailer, 2 trailers total.
Is there an offer out there for LCS to have the same capacity for that, for facility, for shower and restroom at the additional 45?
We haven't got that far yet, but if that was something that we would.
It would come with that.
Yeah, we would figure that out, but there is also access on the backside of the building right there to where they could go in right there.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, there's also an agency who provides showers within the community and a washer and dryer. There is washer and dryers in that back warehouse too, that's not being utilized, I believe.
I'm just
But-
thinking, you know, we're looking at the population specifically for single women who are wanting that separation, that and families, that intermingling in those common use spaces might be something we would want to avoid. And I wouldn't want to weigh down the facility's capacity in the building to add on to 50 additional. I think that would be a potential strain since it was only built to 125.
Without the.
Yeah.
Yeah, without the warehouse. So the warehouse is really an unknown. Like how we can configure it, how it would be either for families or for more single people.
And there is an approval already for about almost $500,000 of CDBG funds for improvements at the shelter. So that's something that could be used to develop whatever was needed to make it run appropriately.
I know one of my main concerns, you know, is being able to segregate by population and provide that security and at least a sense of safety, because people won't want to be out there if they don't feel safe. But I could just, have been operating at a higher capacity than I had ever witnessed since I worked out there since Friday. And I think we got up to 130. So it was good for us to see what that looks like and experience it. But I do feel like if you're talking into 200 or 300 people that would need to come in for services, that maintaining those spaces would be difficult, but also just the dining area is not that big when you're talking those numbers. And I think the flow of people, it would be a lot. So I think having some access to some outside utilities would probably help us segregate populations and not have too many people.
I could speak just a
Wandering.
little bit to that from my previous experience. We had served men and women in one kitchen and we just had times. They were just allowed there, you know, men at this time, women and children at this time, and then another
Yeah.
time for men.
And that's what we.
And it was
used to do
around
too.
300 individuals that used that space. So, yeah, when I was in that kitchen yesterday, I was thinking this would need a few shifts, yeah.
Yeah,
maybe.
definitely. But I just kind of meant like wandering in that space, if
Yeah.
you're hanging out, it fills up quickly.
I'm really thinking too that we're talking about self-identified, we spoken to non-gendered individuals and the safety that lies with trans and the population that is at higher, I mean, that's a very very sensitive and high risk. When it comes to safety, when it comes to all of those things that are needed, including medical. Do we have a capture of numbers for that population, and how are we supplying supports for our trans individuals who are experiencing health systems presently?
I know what we do, I don't have to. Go ahead. We just respect the gender that they identify as and let them be in the space they're the most comfortable. And if their comfort level changes for whatever reason, then we accommodate that as well. So.
That's to me one of the huge benefits and the reason why adding the 45 onto the LCS property is a no-brainer. I mean, you talk about your own individualized space. I mean, it seems like it's a no-brainer for you know, single women, you know, individuals who are, you know, smaller families that can fit in that dwelling, or the larger families can be reserved for the monarch funds. But I mean, to me, if it's a choice between sending them away or taking them on the property, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer to take on those 45, especially if there's support from the city perspective to increase capacity for some of the exterior facilities.
Yeah.
There's another component to those pallets too that's huge in this, and that's that they have a locked door.
Yeah.
There is room in there for all their belongings, which is always an issue, right? It's even an issue at the shelter.
Yeah.
You know, to store all of that and then to divvy it out when they need it. You know, these pallet shelters, their items are securely stored in those units, and that takes away one of the challenges with, you know, with this topic. Well, where are they going to put their stuff? We've always had that issue at winter emergency shelters, have the issue to some degree at Lawrence Community Shelter, have the issue everywhere they go. You know, there's that issue, and the pallet shelters take that out of the equation in a very nice way.
So let's I mean, what I'm picking up on is every board member is talking about how can we do this? I think our first step is to say, yes, we are ready and willing to take on emergency winter shelter. And then the next step is, how do we do this?
Yeah.
Right? Which is our first step, because we cannot do all of these things by the next cold snap. But I mean, you know, I would make a motion that the Lawrence Community Shelter agree to take on this emergency winter sheltering. And that we work with different staff from the city and county and Lawrence Community Shelter to figure out the steps to do it.
So we're in a study session.
Yeah,
So we're not.
but I mean,
Wouldn't be able to make a motion, but I think what you're yearning for, I'm picking up on, and I hope we would accomplish by the end of this study session, is a shared understanding of what our goal is. And I think that's kind of, that's what we need so we can make those next decisions. I'm counting the numbers. There's 350 people potentially on shelter in our community, and you've presented a potential plan to get to maybe 320 plus or minus something. That seems like a pretty significant additional investment into capacity building, which I think was something in the strategic plan that you identified as a need. So I guess the question to us would be, you know, is that where we're ready to take on? And are we ready to say LCS is going to double down and get busy trying to fully embrace the emergency shelter needs for the community?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have any more time to, I mean, our community needs us to say yes, and you know, I think we were appointed to this board so we can make courageous and bold next steps to help our community, and in my opinion, we need to do this, so.
I like that we have brainstorming what is and what isn't. I mean, because every meeting that I've been a part of, has been more information coming that I didn't know 24 hours before. What is the outreach? What does the county contribute to helping to providing for services? Can we go even as like Rock Chalk Park? I don't know, like I wanna know what we could use. And I want this to be moved as like it is a crisis, it is a public health crisis. And I want it to be utilized in that way, so that tone is set with our community, moved in a way that's actionable. So, you know, having these conversations, I know that we're trying to get to that next step and move, but knowing what we can and cannot do is really helpful for me. To know, like, to ask for permissions, or not ask for permission, but just wait for the apology to happen afterwards. I guess maybe I'm moving in that space to like move and have these opportunities for ideas. And then later on, think about, well, you know, what are the consequences? But I didn't get the consequences being housing people during winter. That's our main goal. I think that's shared.
One of the reasons why I was kind of feeling rushed for us to say yes to pallet is because I know it's gonna take some time to get it moved and set up, and then if they're gonna support with the additional trailers, then those are potentially not ordered, so I know time is not on our side, especially with weather, and I don't even know what's realistic this winter season, so if there's anything that I can encourage us to do to get balls rolling is what I would like to see us do.
I think Rebecca has her.
Is that,
hand too.
I was gonna ask, go ahead, Rebecca.
So I appreciate all this conversation, and I think I just want to clarify kind of what my goals and concerns are. Like I want us to house as many people as possible safely, you know, safely and sustainably through this next season and beyond. But I also want to make sure that if we're making a commitment to be the only emergency shelter provider in Lawrence, that we have contracts that are like kind of based on the number of people we're serving. Because if we make a commitment and we have a flat fee and then we have 100 more people than we're expecting, like there's no way to be successful. And so I think we want to be set up to be able to take care of whatever commitments we make.
Yeah, I totally agree with Rebecca in the sense that I think we have a ton of ideas here. We don't know how many people we need to staff the pallet. We don't know, do we need a fence? There's a lot of pieces that we don't know, but there are people, we can find that information out. I think today what we say is we want to do these two things first, not total. To Christina's point, like I think at some point we get a bigger vision, right? But today we say, what is the easiest, best, most people first steps? Okay, now we got to put together an ask, because we can't do it with the money that is in the bank account, right? So we're going to have to put together an ask, and we're going to have to say, we need 6 staff people and a fence and the bathrooms, right? Or those kind of things. So kind of to Rebecca's point that we're not agreeing to do it. And we're trying to figure out then, you know, how do we raise money to do such a thing or whatever, like coming with really concrete asks, because we're saying, yes, we'll take the pallets. Yes, we'll, you know, open up the warehouse. I mean, I don't think the warehouse can be done in short order, right? I mean, you
We
do,
can put cots out there and figure it out. That would
Yeah.
take very long, but.
I mean,
We've within the city had some discussions about what that would look like.
Great.
And what we could do, maybe, that semi trailer over there, is that empty?
That's one of our storage spaces.
But is it empty or?
No, I mean, it's like every other storage space.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so, we could rent more storage, clean out the warehouse, set it up pretty quickly.
great, because I mean, those are the pieces that, you know, I think we want to think about. How do we, I mean, to the crisis, how do we get people shelter? Right? And then how do we do so safely for staff and the guests? right? I mean, and, I mean, I'm not hearing anybody say we shouldn't.
I'm not, but there's one thing we haven't talked about. Camp New Beginnings, you mentioned it, but I haven't heard like how you see LCS involved with that sanctioned campsite.
I see that campsite closing.
Okay,
We received an email this week that it had been already relocated to LCS. So I just didn't know if like, are there less people there right now?
Who is the
Because of
email
us?
from? I mean, so it's not an official email.
so in terms of that campsite closing, is there a scheduled time or is it contingent on?
No, I mean,
Our ability.
upon pallet opening and then having somewhere else for those individuals to go. The event that we held today was to see who would fit where.
Okay,
It sounds like theoretically, at least according to today's count, theoretically, there's 50 there. And there's 50 pallet homes, you know, being constructed, that theoretically, these 50 could move into those. I know it won't happen that way. I get that,
Well,
but
just
in terms
because-
of head counts,
We have certain standards for pallet because it's in a neighborhood, it's next to a school. We will not move any buddy that's got a violent offense or a sexual offense.
okay, so there are some, if you will, qualifications
Yes.
over here that don't exist today in the New Beginnings.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it possible to get a breakdown, best guess estimate of these are designated populations and estimated numbers that we need to be mindful of? So for example, number of single women, number of families with children, individuals who would not be eligible for pallet. And then I'm trying to think of any others, you know, population that we want to make sure to be mindful of when looking at how we increase capacity, making sure we have designated space for underserved populations or vulnerable populations. And because, you know, the security, I would imagine that it is probably less staffing to supervise Monarch than it is to supervise
The warehouse.
the warehouse.
Mhm.
So it would helping when getting that model, if we kind of had an understanding, what's the best practice? What are the populations that we should do best practice to separate, and what's the best guess estimate of? I mean, I know it's not possible to get, but I mean, to get an accurate number, but it'd be great if we had some sort of direction to look at where we need to build capacity.
I think one thing that would be easy to do, not specific numbers, but ratios or percentages of the population. And then as we are kind of dividing up space, we can have an idea. If we have 300 beds, that so many you could divide up to meet demographics, because we do have that at least on average.
Has we made a decision that LCS will operate
I think
Pallet
that's
Village?
it's kind of I mean, I'm picking up the sentiment is we're ready to say we'll find a way forward to do all of this work. Is that, I mean, I think that's, I would love to me, for this meeting to be successful, we would have that clarity. And we wouldn't have to come back and meet again or ask more questions, like any questions, concerns. This is when we need to get that ironed out if possible. Because once we know what our goal is, then the details of how to get there, how to prioritize it. I mean, that's getting into operations. I think we need to be ready to provide, you know, here's the prioritization as we see it as a board, and tell us how to get there to staff.
And just in case we had to operate it, I did develop operational plans. So those are ready to go, job descriptions, trainings needed, all that's ready to go. I mean, of course, you would take it, make it your own,
Sure.
but that's,
I guess I'm
And we
looking
talked
for,
about ways to remotely supervise.
yeah.
is there any? I'd like to still reserve room for our executive session. Are there questions that are still lingering? Rebecca, did you have anything else to ask? Yeah, I see you raising your hand again. Go ahead.
Right, when you said that. So I think the one question I had from a while back in the conversation was just the one stop, or I think Misty called it like the outreach and day center. Are we seeing that happening in the shelter building, or is there gonna be a building nearby for that?
I think it would happen within the building. And I think it would be the service piece that complements the emergency sheltering piece. And just having office space for our providers coming and doing the services that are needed. And letting the shelter folks and not have to take on, you know, the programmatic pieces of ending homelessness for people. Of course, there's gonna have to be some, you know, case management there, but with what we're already investing in the community, you know, we want to use that where it's best and most needed, and that's going to be where our people are.
So just from a space perspective, you're envisioning that like the offices that are currently used for LCS staff would be available to like community partners to meet with guests?
Oh, no, I wouldn't kick anybody out of their offices, but I think there's places we could clean up and reorganize.
There
Yeah.
currently is space in the warehouse area that's already
Yeah,
available for community partners to use as offices.
yeah.
That back area. I didn't know if we're factoring in bed increases plus like the day services. I mean, I think that probably means we can't have as many beds as we would if we didn't have those in the building.
I think it's important to acknowledge that not everybody is gonna leave the streets. You know, we're building something else for that. You know, we want a really robust homeless outreach team. And so it's not gonna be like everybody's like, we're all in, let's all go, you know, and just overwhelm the system. I don't see that happening.
I think what we know from other communities is that just like all the rest of us, folks want choices.
Yeah.
And they deserve choices.
So, you know, in my mind, you know, we work camp by camp. Of course, offering, you know, having a great outreach team going out and building connections and trust. And then, you know, just kind of singling out one camp at a time, trying to clear them out and get them out of, you know, being unsheltered, whatever their situation is, and trying to offer better. But the only thing that might, you know, arise quickly is when the weather gets bad. And so having that warehouse cleaned out and that space available, you know, I think we could do a pretty quick agreement with the city to increase numbers for that. I think that's something that probably should be considered pretty quickly.
What do we need to do from our perspective to get if the city is willing to assist in that process, what do we need to do to get the ball rolling on that?
I think if you guys agree that you want to move forward with that, then we can help take the process through for the SUP.
I think that's also like where we need to have a discussion about the leadership of the shelter, and we'll discuss that in our executive session.
Okay. Is will it be appropriate to have a motion today to be able to tell the city that we want to green light them?
Not in our study session.
Okay.
But after we resume the open meeting at the conclusion of the executive session.
Okay.
I do want to point out too that we do have some great staff at Camp New Beginnings that I think would be beneficial as you guys expand.
It's interesting because there was a staff meeting today discussing operations and asking staff how they felt operating at this higher capacity. And overall, people have been very positive, and they made a list of things that they would like to see to help support in this situation. And one of the things they did would be, they actually said to welcome those people to our team to work together. So they were looking forward to that. Two things that I have questions on. The street outreach we have advocated to be a part of, not necessarily be the sole provider, but to be able to have our faces in the community and build those relationships and encourage people to come to shelter and access services is that something that is being considered? then?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I would want the shelter to be the whole team right now. But definitely a team member.
Okay, yeah.
That's
That's
something
good.
that I strongly agree, and if the city opens that up for, it's something that I would really love to see us have a bigger role in almost outreach, because if it's our responsibility to, you know, house a community, we need to be the ones building those relationships, and I really believe that, that it's, it needs to be our team saying, come, I will be there, I'm a trusted, you know, community member with you, and I think that it's incredibly important, and I appreciate you saying that, because that's, like, definitely would like to see us go in that direction.
And it's a lot easier if you do build the trust, and then you can say, hey, I got a place you can go right now. And nobody else would be able to say that except for a staff member.
Or what can I do to get you to where you'll be willing to do that? We actually have someone that is almost completed their certification as well, so that's good.
Yeah.
Another concern I have, you know, we're in a situation that's tough for us because we have people's lives in our hands, no matter what we do. If we reduce services, that could cause loss of life. If we take too many people on, it also can have a risk associated with it. And if we're the sole provider in this space, one thing I do worry about is if there's another COVID outbreak. And maybe there's not enough staff to support, or whatever that looks like. And I know for us to be comfortable, we talk about this a lot, and really would want some type of plan B in place, and not trying to figure out what we do when it happens.
So do you already have that plan for the
Not at
people you
this
serve
level.
now?
Not
So-
not at that level.
I'd like to respond to that.
Sure.
I truly appreciate the concern for that possibility. And I think it's imperative that we as an agency have plans in place. A lesson learned probably for a lot of organizations was how do we get ready for the next one? It wasn't, but 10 years ago, we had a H1N1 pandemic. It wasn't quite as significant in terms of its lethality. But pandemics come, they go, they come again. I think we could be fairly confident that there's not going to be an immediate pandemic in the next few years. Don't hold me to that, don't go to the national news. But as pandemics go, it's not unreasonable to think that in the next 10 years, something else could happen. There's also other variables like climate warming that could make things different. It's on us as an organization to have contingency plans.
Yeah.
And to not be caught off guard.
No.
The
And I bet just
health department, for those that haven't, don't know the inner workings of how we do our emergency planning. As a county, we have an emergency management department that does all hazards planning. And the health department has a role in that plan. And pandemic planning is part of what we do. When people thought no one's ever planned for this before, we just sat in our office and go ahead, you can think that. Plans are in place for all sorts of emergencies as a community, but individual organizations, especially those that serve vulnerable populations, need to also prepare for that. So
I was gonna say, we
I
have.
mean, it's our responsibility as LCS board of directors to ensure that we can manage through whatever crisis comes. As Christina said, we're already in a crisis right now. So how do we build that capacity? I think sanctioned camping in the scope of things you do to manage an overwhelming number of people that don't have shelter. One option is sanctioned camping. How do you do it well? We could probably learn from how the city approached it during COVID and even during this period just after COVID. We probably should be prepared for that possibility of sanctioned campsites as a way to manage if there's another significant biological event. It's not our highest priority, I would say at this point, but it's a reasonable way to respond to a public health emergency.
Charlie, I want to make sure I shared that we do have the emergency management department currently engaged in developing an emergency operations plan for pallet. We've got,
There you go.
Robert Benecki's got a meeting set up with the national director of pallet. And Misty and Mitch are gonna be doing a presentation for the LEPC, so we're trying to make sure that our frontline responders know and are engaged in that plan for all of pallet, wherever it's gonna be as well. And expand that to the full system so that we're
Yeah.
helping our unhoused community members too.
A significant number, worked with city and county and got a significant number of hotels and, but yeah, I mean, I think.
I mean, I think there's a lot we learned, and if this is the space and we're gonna own it, we need to probably be kind of thinking through those, how we respond the next time. And, if this situation gets worse and we do have 100 more people a year from now that are unsheltered, we better be continuing to kind of evaluate our ability to respond to that, so. That's all I'll say.
So one of the early slides, we were talking about how agencies and departments are feeling stressed and understaffed. And we're talking about LCS significantly ramping up responsibilities. How confident, I mean, I understand that there's personnel within the city that are working at the camp right now that could be part and parcel of this, but what have the job applicants been like for LCS? Do you feel confident in being able to say that in 4 weeks we would have, 40%, 50% increase in staffing?
I think that would be something we would have to discuss. I know it's been difficult for us because we have not been able to offer really a competitive wage compared to other service providers in a similar field, or even with the city staff. So I think that's something that would have to be discussed as we move forward, is what is it gonna take, and wages could be a part of that conversation, I would assume. But also for us, I think retention is obviously an issue in this field and similar fields. And I think that focusing on training and staff development, because we have not had the capacity to really shape people and grow them and develop them in a way to be successful. And I think that's also something we have to consider. And we would have to improve all of that significantly. I think we can get applicants. Quality applicants is a concern.
I think there's a potential here so what we're really talking about is what we used to do, what we have historically done in terms of winter emergency sheltering, is bringing that within Lawrence Community Shelter. Even not a lot, that was a lot of volunteers, but it was also some paid staff people, but those jobs were temporary to that period of time, to some degree. So, my only point is that the component of this winter that is specifically about winter emergency sheltering potentially could fall in that category, where we may need some additional staffing for 3 or 4 months that perhaps are not necessary year round. I don't know that for a fact, but if we're moving away from, we're going to have a winter emergency shelter at the rec center and figure out a way to staff that. If we're doing away with that and we're coming out here, we have some of those same challenges. And I think we can meet those challenges somewhat in the same way, to some degree, and maybe even also with some volunteers.
Yeah.
And also, if we could find ways to have improved security and supervision, it can pull back the need for actual people to be doing that supervision and not require so much staffing. So I think that would be also something to look at. Because a lot of our problems right now is there's so many spaces, like little spaces, and then the property and to supervise it with inadequate like cameras and locks. Access to things, that is really what really gives us a challenge, especially when we're serving this higher rate right now.
Do you think that the relief and part-time staff would be interested in going full-time?
Most of the people that are part-time are either have another job or they go to school. But I can also say that increasing part-time positions is usually more cost-effective, because then whenever you have full-time employees, they all qualify for benefits. And that ends up being also a pretty significant expense.
Cause right now, it looks like we have all of our full-time DSAs filled. But we have part-time that are available, am I correct? Yeah. And then, so I mean, fortunately, I mean, having 14 full-time being full is.
And we're doing really well right now.
So I mean, I would think that if we have 14 currently, and our gap is with those part-time. Yeah, I mean,
How many DSAs on a shift now?
It varies. We kind of cater it during peak time, so like our nighttime intake process is really challenging for us, so we kind of had heavy on that. But 3 to 4, typically.
So all of this, you know, also could be something that we understand through finances and audits. I mean, like your financial budget too. So do we have the 2022 finances? Like, is that available for the board to view, or have we already shared that within our Google Space?
the
Well, the
audited
22
financial statement is not complete, correct?
No, yeah, I actually have been working on that, and I'm almost.
for 2022,
Yeah,
2023.
2022.
All the prior audited financial statements are in the shared board drive.
Okay. But once you continue building that, we'll have more of an understanding about like comings and goings of money, or of how staffing works, who's getting paid what, how we look like to continue staffing throughout these months too. Okay. When can we expect like that to be finished or to be submitted?
Well, the 990 has to be submitted by November 15th. And the official audit could be completed later than that.
To November 15th?
Yes.
What is holding up completion of the audit? Did I miss that?
We have been with the same firm for a while, and it seems like typically that they ask for an extension. I don't know if they just have a large amount of people that they're serving, but also with me to get them documents. With everything else, it just takes time. Reworking it. I have to look it up.
Kindred?
No,
Kindred
they're
is
not the ones that do.
Kindred doesn't do the audit, they just do the routine accounting. Cummins, something and something.
Schmidtline, Cummins, Kaufman, and Schmidtline.
So I'd like to be able to finish up our study session and my aspiration was we would leave the study session with no questions unanswered, clarity around expectations, so that we're all kind of sharing a common operating picture. Feel like we've gotten there? Is there anything that is waiting to be asked still?
The only thing I want to clarify, just that I heard it correctly, is this last bullet about the community outreach. We are not being asked to provide those services. We're being asked to find space for partners to provide those services. Right.
But that's like the medical and mental health, the specialized services. But we would still be doing some form of case management because we're doing data entry and assessments, the age and minus stuff. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, a lot of that could be handed over to Bert Nash, you know, as far as getting IDs, housing, those types of things.
And I know part of that is we would be the ones with them and have that relationship too, which I think makes some of those things more successful for us, but I think that's
Yeah.
something we can work out. I wouldn't say they can do intake because, you know,
Right.
yeah. That's usually when we do assessments and profile description.
Are there any other questions?
I move that we,
We don't have to move, I just,
oh, sorry.
yeah, I just think. Feel like this is where, this is, the first meeting we had last week was really a lot of procedural stuff. And this one, we need to get clear on what's being expected of us. Shaped by the strategic plan the city and the county have worked on. And I feel like we've got a clear idea of what is being asked. Melody, is there any other questions about what's expected that you'd like to clarify?
I don't think so. I think it's just getting engaged in those conversations.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jill. Looks like you're already trying to leave.
I'm not leaving.
Okay,
I was gonna leave this, I think we're leaving the space though.
yeah. Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Misty, for spending time with us tonight to help us get a better understanding of what your aspirations are from the city and the county. And we will now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the executive session. At this point, I will entertain a motion, and for those that maybe are looking for help with the wording, I've got. I'm gonna hear this. I've got draft motion if anyone would like to use that. And we have access to the building until how late?
As long as you need it, can you be the last one out?
That's good.
You sure? Okay. Why don't you do the thing and then I'll just show you real quickly.
Charlie, there's a point of order, real quick. Sorry to interrupt, but at the previous meeting, the executive session was to be about the unionization of the employees.
No, sir.
Is that not accurate?
No. That was a regular agenda item.
Apology.
All right. Anybody like to make a motion?
I would move that the board recess into executive session in accordance with the non-elected personnel matter exception ASA 75-43-19B1 to deliberate on personnel matters related to a shelter employee. Is that sufficient?
No, it's not sufficient. Coma requires the.
Keep going, okay. The justification for the executive session is to protect the privacy of the employee. Board will reconvene in an open meeting in the Douglas County Public Works Training Room at
It's 8:03 right now.
8:20,
I think we might need more time than that.
8:30.
Well, we're ending at 8:30, maybe it's 8:29, so we can come back on and inform folks of the closing. I'm trying to remember someone. But we need to let them know we're coming back.
8:29. You can start with that.
8:29, after the executive session is concluded.
All right, there's a motion on the floor.
Second,
It's been moved and seconded to go into executive session. Is there any other discussion about the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Rebecca,
Aye.
is there any opposed? Say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Okay. I'm gonna take everyone that's on the Zoom, put them into the waiting room. Except for Rebecca.
So. The front doors, the very, very front doors, gonna be locked and everything, so if someone's knocking, you go look, sorry, come on, probably not. If they're stacked here, they've got key access. When you leave this building, just
All right. Okay, we're back in the open session. Does anyone feel comfortable making a motion?
Want me to do it?
Good shot.
All right, so I make a motion that we conduct a search for an executive director. That we do it expeditiously and that we authorize the chair to develop the job description. And that we issue it as soon as possible.
Right, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Any discussion about the motion?
Do we want to set a timeline of when we'll have the position open for?
I would think within what you said expeditiously and as soon as possible, that gives me enough direction.
Great.
So. Any other discussion, or you want a more firm timeline?
Oh, I just didn't know how long we were gonna have the job posting up for.
I would imagining 2 weeks.
2 weeks to this date will be November 15th.
It wouldn't be to this day. I think it'd be when the.
When the job description is posted. Any other discussion? I think one thing that would be helpful is to identify how the process will be made accessible to the public, so that we can allow shelter staff, community members, guests of the shelters, and other community partners to have some insight into who the applicants are, and maybe have an opportunity to interact with them. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have an opportunity for there to be a public forum on finalists, and maybe if not all the candidates, but if the board reviewed the finalists, yeah.
Any other discussion on the motion?
This isn't on the motion, but just the interview process. I'd love to see a guest of the shelter on the interview team and also an employee of the shelter on the interview team.
Any other input before we vote?
Is there a plan for it to be a national search as proposed?
I will do my best, I think, to make it as available to the country as possible. I think that should be reasonable. Any other questions, discussion? Okay. The motion is to initiate a search for the executive director position. It's been made and seconded. Is there any other question, comment? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. All right, is there anything else that anyone would like to consider for tonight?
We talked about it. Did we want to make any formal motion on pallet or taking on ensuring that we take on winter? I mean, do we want to take on any of those formal motions?
I mean, I'm open to that. I think that kind of feels like we did kind of get to a point where we agree on the general principle that we want to take on the whole operations around emergency sheltering in the community. So if there's a motion, really just to kind of make that clear expectation, I think that would be helpful for staff to know that that's what the board's expecting.
I would also like to propose taking inventory of what Melanie has said that the staff needs, and in these next 2 weeks, especially as we're talking about bringing on development of leadership, training and staff development. I would propose that we look into what each of our organizations may offer, who we know that would be a training that would be beneficial to the staff and to the staff development as we are working towards moving this position into the space of Lawrence Community Shelter. So that would be something to do within the board, to look for training, look for staff development, so that there could be continued support throughout the next 2 weeks, or the 2 weeks once the job posting becomes available in public.
Melanie, would it be possible to anonymously survey the staff about what some of the training supports that they would be interested in receiving? Maybe just make a simple Google form and just have the staff kind of submit ways that we can support from a training perspective to help with some of the, I mean, I think I would love to hear it from the staff where they feel like they're needing, you know, whether it's from kind of a leadership development, whether it's operational skills, whether it's some more leaning on some more emergency management. I'd love to just really know what they're looking for, because I think a lot of us could offer, even if it's something as simple as, you know, can Free State folks come and do kitchen management, food safety, and that kind of stuff, and but not to offer your team, but you know what I mean.
We talk about that a lot because we realize that training and development has been something that's really been inadequate for all of us.
Yeah.
And I actually had just reached out to the care center to get bystander intervention training because it's been a while since we had it, and that's really essential in our space. So absolutely, I'm sure they will have a lot of input for that because we discussed a lot.
Okay.
Do we want to create a motion to that effect to provide some, I don't know, budget amount for training development for immediate needs, or is it adequate to just tell you, hey, let's get this identified and bring it back to us? Is that what?
Yeah, there is one training that as an agency that we have wanted. And it's kind of a package thing, and it's an ongoing training from someone that it's specific to serving unhoused population. And he has really good trainings, so I know that would probably be on the list, and we can get costs, and I can just bring back the resources that we're aware of that line up with what they would like to see.
Is there anything we want to do more formally, or feel like we've got clear enough direction to staff?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we need I don't think we need a motion
No,
to direct you to survey staff. Yeah.
Look for training.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else tonight, or can I get a motion to adjourn?
Misty was saying that they have palate training specific to palate.
I might just entertain a motion if possible. I don't know if city needs it, and I really truly don't know the timeline on the 45 additional pallet, but I would entertain I would offer a motion to begin the steps towards developing the process to accepting the 45 additional pallet shelters.
Actually, there's 20 to 25 additional that are being offered. There's 25 that we already have.
Right, so taking the 25 and then the potential 25 more from the Kansas City.
Right.
So I think the city would be brokering that, so I might, I don't know if we need to separate the two. She said it was anywhere from 45 to 50, but either way, I would love to just get the groundworks going to know to start having that exploratory conversation with the city about what the next steps would be, how the infrastructure on that piece of property would need to be handled. So I would just love to, you know, have a board directive that,
Right.
you know, we're not dictating timeline, but what we're saying is we'd like to go in that direction. And I don't know what that,
Is the operations committee, would that be a task that you feel like you could take on?
I think so.
Or do we want a separate thing? Just, you
No,
guys
that
already
sounds
have,
right to me.
that's the three of you, so
Yeah,
basically to help to move forward on, I would say even more than that, like the pallets here at the property. Also like working with the planning department or whoever other staff are in the city to make progress on the warehouse.
On the warehouse, yeah. And in my
And then-
mind, the warehouse is step one. And in terms of getting it done, because that's the one that's gonna require the least amount of time
Okay,
to provide the most amount of immediate space.
is that, the three of you, are you willing to kind of take that as a task? We need a motion for that, or are you comfortable just taking that on?
I don't know if we need a formal agreement with the city to have them come on in and help out with the warehouse, but, I guess,
I think I'm comfortable if you guys are agreeing to take that on. Put it in your capable hands.
I'm certainly in agreement with that.
Okay.
But
But I think there is, the one thing that might be worth, kind of operationalizing that is, at the city commission meeting on the 17th, the question was raised around like, you know, what are the actual resource needs, what's the next request gonna be? And I imagine the next request is where we could put into an agreement, like, that we're gonna take over the pallet shelter village, that we're gonna take operations of that we're going to expand by using the warehouse, that we're gonna expand by adding this capacity with additional pallets in the back. And then come up with a price, what that cost estimate would be for the city. Because I think Brandon alluded to a second addendum. And that's, to me, would be the kind of the way to, you know, make it so, work with city staff to develop that addendum number 2.
That sounds good to me, and I'm just sorry, I guess maybe because we've been sitting so long. I would like to also offer that we have someone from either Burt Nash or some therapy that is already in contractual agreement with the county to tag or to go along with the Camp New Beginnings tours. I'd like to kind of understand what is needed by the folks they are taking from the campsites that are already you know, housed in their own comfort or whatever that looks like. But also as we're looking, I think it's in closing indefinitely, what does that look for that transition for folks? So I'm thinking of just making sure that relationships are still strong. We are assessing people's mental capacity and health and care as we are trying to make sure that we develop these high-risk situations to be less risk as possible, so that we have somebody as a therapy working alongside the county as they're making these campsites or work camps and working camp by here to make sure that it is closed during this times of inclement weather. So I don't know how to form that into a sentence where there could be action.
Well, maybe a way to do it would be, I heard tonight, there's interest with the current shelter staff to invite in those employees. I mean, it'd be they'd have to apply, I suppose, but maybe there's, I mean, that would obviously be a new cost, which gets back to addendum number 2. How does that get, that transition of staffing get kind of put into what's the cost gonna be to bring those staff, those that choose to do so, to bring them over here?
My thoughts were from what I hear, there's already contractual agreements that could be built into that being as a work hourly for someone already existing on it, so it wouldn't be a cost to the
Okay.
county.
they should already be there.
You're talking about the county's contracts with other providers.
That's what
Got
I'm
it.
talking about.
So why don't we do 2 things? We got a motion, right?
Not quite.
I mean, to me, it looks like we're doing 2 things. The operations committee is going to come up with in consultation with the city, sort of what our next steps are. Some point, we have to put numbers of people and costs with that, but we can't really do that until we have a better information. So if our plan is by our next meeting, which is the 30th, right? That we have a draft based on the operations committee's work with the city of sort of what our next steps are and what that addendum to ask is gonna be. So that's one thing. And then the executive committee works on the ED search. And that we sort of make a lot of progress by the next meeting so that, I mean, part of the rationale for the ED search is we are taking on a mammoth task and we need to identify the leader that's gonna take us there. And so that by the time we end up at the November meeting, the official November meeting, we have those two tasks done. And I think what you're talking about could be part of operations and one piece of that plan.
I think so. I think that could be moved into that space.
Am I capturing sort of where we're trying to get to?
I think you've done it really well.
Okay, great.
So, you want to take a stab at a motion, or do you want, I think I can throw out a motion too. So-
Great.
All right, so I move that we task the operations committee to consult with the city in development of a proposal that would support addendum 2. And the due date for that would be by the next regular board meeting, November 30th. You want to do that one first? Okay.
Great. Second.
All right, is there any other discussion about that motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion to task the operations committee, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. I move that we task the executive committee with the executive director search activities. That's straightforward.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion about that motion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Is there any other motion, or do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
All right, motion made to adjourn.
I second.
It's been seconded. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all for a very productive meeting.